In a recent Flea Market HiFi episode, I'll leave a link to that above, I came across this Sony TC-WR661 dual cassette deck. Now, I've been in the market for a dual cassette deck for a while. All I have really are singles, and I'd really been wanting a Sony because that was something that back in the day I really couldn't afford. Well, this turned out to be a pretty good find at the flea market. Stay tuned, we'll take a look at it and take a look inside. I ended up picking this up for about 20 bucks at that flea market. I thought that was a pretty good deal. I expected it not to work and to need tons of service, and it turns out it didn't need any of that. The belts were in good shape, looked like they'd been replaced recently. Everything was lubed up. It was just a little bit dirty. So let's take a look at the Sony TC-WR661 and see what makes it kind of neat in my eyes. Now, I really do like this deck. I think it has a really nice late 90s vibe to it. Nice rounded edges on everything, black finish, really nice, really right up my alley. This is something that in 1996 I probably wouldn't have been able to afford, even though it wasn't one of their high-end decks. Now let's kind of take a look at the features that it has and what makes it kind of neat in my eyes. Now over here on the left-hand side, the display's a little bit small for my liking, but it's nice and bright. It has a nice digital VU meter on it, digital counter for each deck. I think that's nice. Tape counter resets for each deck. Now the controls over here on this side are for deck A, and being a dual deck, you have separate controls for each one. Now if you notice, deck A is a playback only deck. Not a whole lot of these dual decks had recording functionality on both decks. Most of them were just on one. So on this one, deck A is just playback. But it did originally come with a remote control, which I do not have for this one. I wish I did. That would have made it, kind of complete, but a nice deck nonetheless. Now, if we move over to the other side, we have a lot of the controls duplicated. We've got the both direction play, fast forward, rewind, stop, same as the other side, but this deck on deck B does have the record functionality. Now, you do have record mute, which mutes your input as you're recording in case you want to skip some pops in between recording a record or whatever. Pause. Now up here we do have high-speed dubbing availability, so you can dub from deck A to deck B, copy your tape, something we used to do a lot back in the day. And it does have the high-speed dubbing feature as well. Fader to fade out or in between tracks. And it does have auto recording level functionality, which I don't like. I never use it. I like to use the manual recording control here. Make sure you record your tapes properly. It is a Dolby B and C noise reduction deck, which is nice. As most of you know, if you watch this channel, I'm not a big fan of noise reduction, but it's nice to have it here on the decks. And then your direction selector here, which will determine whether the tape stops at the end of the side you're playing, if it continues back and forth, or relay play will go from one deck to the other when the tape is done. So kind of a neat functionality. Now if you look down here at the bottom, this deck does use Sony's rotating head for the auto reverse, dual capstan and pinch roller, and it rotates the head instead of having a 4-track head in there for the auto reverse. So kind of a neat feature, something that we just took a look at that's similar on a Marantz deck. But Sony's the one that I remember from back in the day that used that rotating head a lot. And from what I understand, it's a pretty good system. Somebody mentioned in that in a comment in that Marantz video that it actually allows for better azimuth adjustment for playback and recording on both sides, since there's a little bit of a difference in that angle. Something I hadn't thought of, but it was a good point, so I appreciate them pointing that out. But pretty standard mechanism on the inside of this. Dual capstan, dual pinch roller. It only uses one at a time, depending on the direction that it's playing. It's not a dual drive system in this particular deck. Now I know a lot of you are going to want to take a look on the inside of this, and I don't blame you because I'm the same way. I want to see how these things are put together. This one's kind of interesting. I went ahead and took the screws off of it already so we could get in it. There is not a whole lot going on in here. It is a very sparse deck. I'll overlay some pictures and everything on top of here so you can see what I'm seeing. But there is a very small circuit board. There is not a whole lot going on. Looks like maybe one or two ICs. It looks like, well, maybe three. Not a whole lot of adjustments. Ribbon cables for everything. I mean, it's a very mid to late 90s deck in the sense that it's put together very simply. You know, things have all become integrated. It's probably one that's not really designed on the electronic side of it to be serviceable, but the cassette mechanism itself definitely is. It looks like they made this very simple and easy to take apart in order to change all the belts, lube everything up, and get to everything. Looks like there's maybe 4 screws holding this back panel on, and then you have free access to all of the belts and pulleys and everything behind it. So as far as the mechanism goes, the dual cassette mechanism looks like to be one of the simplest that I've come across in a long time. But as you can see, the belts are all in good shape. Like I said, it seemed like this one had been serviced recently. There's fresh lube on everything as well. I'm really impressed for the price that I got it, that it's in such clean and good working condition. So it'll be a nice addition to my collection here, at least for a while. Now, the next thing I wanted to do was test out the sound quality of this. I expect Sony machines to be pretty good. Even their cheap stuff back in the day still sounded better than some of the bargain brands out there for their what they considered top-end equipment. So I wanted to take a look at it with a couple of different tapes. I had tried out the ATR Magnetics Cobalt Gold series before. It was one that I had bought brand new recently. They're still making these. And, neat looking tape. Looks like a reel-to-reel. I hadn't had good luck with it out of any of my other decks, so I figured, well, we'll try it in something that's a little bit newer than what I've been trying it in before. So let's see how that sounds. Now, I was still pretty disappointed with that tape. It just didn't sound right. And that's the experience that I've had in the other decks that I've tried it in 3 or 4 other times. So I decided the Sony deck could probably do better. Let's try a Maxell MX60. Now, this was a great tape back in the day. I've always had good luck with it. I'm expecting this one to do a little bit better in this Sony deck. Now that's more like it. That's what I expect a Sony deck to sound like, even though this wasn't a high-end model back in the day. Now, I'm going to keep this in my collection for now. I'm still looking for a Sony deck with Dolby S. That's something that I've never messed with, and that's really what I'd been looking for when I found this, but it was too good of a deal to pass up. Now, what are your experiences with Sony? Did you have their equipment back in the day? Did you like it? What decks did you use? What's your experiences with them? And for people that have never owned a Sony deck, Do you want one? Are you looking for them? What are the things that you're looking for in a Sony cassette deck? Now, that's all I have for today. I want to thank each and every one of you again for joining me on this journey. I appreciate you taking the time out of all the millions of YouTube videos out there to watch one of mine. It truly means a lot to me that you've taken the time to do that. Now, I appreciate your comments below. I try to answer all of them as I can. Make sure you hit the like button on the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. And we'll see you next time here on the Vintage Electronics channel.